all of our listeners in Boston can just get at me at Tantier.
Hello, welcome to Hat Trick. I'm Jordan Dowler-Coltman. I'm joined as always by Braydon Dowler-Coltman and our good friend Elliott Tanti. Welcome back, boys. We took a week off last week for the long weekend.
Weekend.
It was not because we were licking our wounds. It was a long weekend break. A little time to heal up. We will get to the Edmonton Oilers this week. We're going to spend 2 topics on them. And then a little bit in our third topic, it's a bit of an Oilers flavor, but it's a bit bigger conversation too. But I guess, boys, before we get going here, how do you feel? Are we over it yet?
Oh yeah, it's hockey, man. We care about it, but there's a lot bigger issues in this world than NHL hockey. So yeah, you take a couple days, you lick your wounds, you listen to some postseason press conferences, then you do a show about it and you move on. That's how I feel.
All right.
And then you hit the links just as everybody else is. I spent I had a tea time today, Elliott. My tea time is at 2:30. I got off the course at 8:30 p.m.
Oh boy.
So I'm excited. I'm here. I'm ready, but I am tired.
All right. Well, we will spend some time. We do also have a special guest in topic 1. We are going to have a conversation that Braydon and I had a little bit earlier today with our friend Ray Strachan from Winnipeg. He very graciously accepted our congratulations on behalf of all Jets fans. He did not rub it in our faces too much, but he definitely was excited for what's next, and as he should be. So that'll be topic 1, and then we'll get to, as I said, our Oilers postmortem, and then we're going to talk a little bit about some fan behavior. Just before we do, I do think it's really important that we take a moment to acknowledge something in the news. In Kamloops this week, a really terrible discovery was made. The Tecumloops Tishkamekw First Nations have been working for almost a decade now to uncover the answer as to where many of their children who were taken from them by the RCMP and the Government of Canada and sent to residential schools went, because there have been many children who just simply disappeared. The estimated number when this investigation by the First Nations began was around 50. They believed there was a mass grave of 50 children, I should say. So they were able in the last year to secure funds to be able to hire a company to come and do ground penetrating radar. That work was done over the last week or so, and they went public, I believe on Wednesday or Thursday last week, with the news that there were not just 50 young children in a mass grave. There were 215 victims of a cultural genocide that was committed in this country. The Kamloops Indian Residential School was opened in 1890 and remained in operation, usually having an annual student body count of around 500 Indigenous children, till 1969. And then again, for almost another 10 years, 1978, it finally closed its doors. So for 10 years, it was a day school. It wasn't a full residential school, but the point was the same. Run by the Catholic Church under the direction of the Canadian government. 215 children, ranging in age from 16 all the way down to as young as 3 years old. Taken from their families, ripped from their families, and sent to a school where they endured unimaginable horrors. And in this case, at least 215 of them laid to their final resting place in a ground on top of other victims of the same crimes and left undeclared and undiscovered. Obviously, it's an unimaginable tragedy. It's a disgrace, and it's something that I think needs to be acknowledged. So I would ask that we just take a quick moment of silence. You can do that in whatever way you want, but we just wanted to acknowledge the lives lost, recognizing that this is 215 that we know about. and that it is only the tip of what is, I'm sure, an absolutely unimaginable iceberg. An uncountable number of victims of this, as I said, cultural genocide, and that is what it was. And a part of our history that we have for so long and for too long overlooked and completely ignored. So we wanted to just acknowledge that, because every one of these lives deserves that recognition, that these families deserve that recognition for the horror they went through. So I'd ask that you join us in that, and then we'll get on with our show. Thank you for that. All right, here's Braydon and my conversation with Ray. All right, here we are, topic one. As promised, Ray Strachan is here. Well, it wasn't a lot of fun for us Oiler fans. I'm sure it was a lot more fun for you, Ray. We had to spend some time going back over what was at least a very dramatic first round series. Different storylines, obviously, on both sides of the ledger. But we're going to talk more later in the episode about, kind of post-mortem, we'll say, of the Oilers, a team that obviously had Winnipeg's number through the regular season, but playoff hockey's different. They all kept trying to tell us that. None of us were listening. They kept saying playoff hockey's different. And then all of a sudden we got up there and Winnipeg's got at least three lines. They can just roll over you constantly. They played some amazing defense. I mean, first off, congratulations. You called it. You wanted your Winnipeg Jets. You had your Winnipeg Jets. You got the Edmonton Oilers and you swept them. So congratulations. All congratulations. How do you feel? How did it feel last week when it was said and dusted? Nice and quick too.
Oh man, I'm so happy. This has been decades in the making for the Jets to finally beat the Oilers in the playoff series. This is not just, we need revenge for the regular season. This isn't, maybe it's just in Winnipeg, this sentiment, but every time when we had the good old Smythe division, we'd always either play the Oilers or the Flames in the playoffs, and that would be the end of it. So this felt really good in regards to that. And, I wasn't expecting a 4-game sweep. I think I called the Jets in 6, but wow. Everything I hoped that would happen, Hellebuck on his head, the defense playing better than they are, and those veterans, they came to play. Scheifele came to play. Wheeler came to play. Morrissey came to play. So I'm just very happy and surprised by how it ended.
Yeah, I mean, it was a tight series, and yet, it never felt like the Oilers really got their feet together. You know what I mean? They even in game 2, obviously, or pardon me, game 3, obviously they had that lead and they blew that. And that's probably one of the most devastating losses as an Oiler fan I've ever suffered through, because it happened so fast. But even with a 4-1 lead, I never felt safe. I felt confident that they were going to win a game, but I still wasn't sure they were going to be able to turn the whole thing around. There was something just sort of, I don't know, it was like a dark cloud came in after that game 1 where we just couldn't get anything to go. And then it just got scarier and scarier. Honestly, though, a lot of fun to watch, enjoyable. And I mean, 3 overtime games in a row. You can't really ask for much more of a series. Really, game 1 looks more lopsided than it was. That was a 2-1 game with 2 empty netters. Yeah. Goalies on both sides played great. We did talk about that a couple weeks ago in our pre-playoff extravaganza. We both sort of joked about how if one team's goalie could stand on the head, we didn't expect both to, but Winnipeg still had a way to find a way through Mike Smith. I know, Braydon, I know you took it pretty hard, but now you've had a little bit of time to digest. Where are you feeling about all this?
Well, I'm still feeling, because I have to now wait until next October to start watching my hockey team play again. Yeah, I think what was so shocking was this sweep, the fact that they couldn't win a single playoff game, and I want to come down hard on the fact that people say this always happens to Oilers fans, this always happens to the team. The fact of the matter is, the Winnipeg Jets played a hell of a series, and both teams had a really, really great. Like you just said, the 3 overtimes, like that's all we could hope for a really great. not all we could hope for, but we had a really great series there. Would have loved to see it get pushed to 7 after they were down 3 in the hole, but hats off to the Jets. They played a really, really great. They capitalized on momentum when it turned. They scored some really timely goals, like you guys just said. The goalie Connor Hellebuck played lights out, and it's hard. It's so hard for an Oilers fan because we had such high expectations. I have high expectations every year, but when Connor puts up astronomical numbers like that, you want to see it follow through in the postseason, and so. It's frustrating. I'm sure that team's just as frustrated right now going into the off season with nothing to show.
It's interesting. I would say, and Ray, correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels a little bit like we're these two teams though are at slightly different places as far as their core. I mean, Winnipeg has had some playoff runs with this sort of core group prior to this that haven't, obviously they haven't won a Stanley Cup, they haven't got all the way, but they've had some. A bit more experience in these big games than the Oilers have. I think the Oilers as a team will now, especially their core, will have learned a lot from this series, both the struggles of it, but also, just the experience of being in those tight games, knowing the checking gets tighter, knowing that goaltending is so critical and how timely possessions are. I mean, 2 of those overtimes are one off of lost faceoffs in the defensive zone. That's experience that you can't buy. So, but the Jets have had that experience. Those guys have been through some tough series. So does it feel different this year?
I wouldn't say different. It feels different after sweeping the Oilers. This is not a dig. It feels different in the sense that it feels almost magical that first round, how it happened. It could have been any team, whether it been Montreal or Toronto either. I think we would have the same feeling of, oh, wow, we're surprised by this. And maybe there is a bit of momentum. If they can keep it going, they've gotten some rest now. And it's good to see Montreal and Toronto go to a 7th game, let them beat each other up for another game. You just start really feeling this momentum. So I think there's an excitement above regular playoff excitement that we're starting to feel in Winnipeg now. We're like, oh, okay, well, we're going to face a team that's been through 7 games right now, and we're fresh and we're feeling it. And we played physical. So I think it's a cautious confidence that we're building up here in Winnipeg as fans.
So have you been watching that series?
Yes.
Sizing them up. Who do you want? Because you called it last time. We asked you before the season was over. You said you wanted the Oilers, and hey, I had that work out. So who do you want?
It's by roster, we'd obviously want to see Montreal. By wanting to beat someone, you always want to beat the Leafs. You really want to beat the Leafs, especially this team where they loaded them up, ready for a win now. So it'd be great to face Montreal in regards to facing odds, but in regards to feeling good, I'd love to play the Leafs and I'd love to beat them. I would. And it's encouraging because we were able to put a cap, not all 4 games, on Draisaitl and McDavid. Yeah. And if we can do that with Marner and Austin Matthews, I think things could look good. And of course, Hellebuck.
Yeah, that was that was one of the biggest frustrations was just the lack of space given to some of those players. How much space they need to just turn the tide, and Winnipeg did such a good job at just suffocating the space on the ice. And I think either Montreal and Toronto is going to have a hard time with that.
Yeah, I think the only difference when you look at the Oilers in Toronto is the depth. I mean, Toronto does definitely have a different level of depth than what Edmonton could offer to compete with. But like you said, Winnipeg has had enough time now to game out both teams. And really, I think Paul Maurice deserves a lot of credit. He won that coaching sort of matchup. And I think Dave Tippett will have taken away a lot of lessons from that series. But Paul Maurice's experience also shone through. He really got the matchup game down. He figured out what he needed from each lineup. It didn't hurt that as the series progressed, guys got healthy, and Ehlers came back and had a huge two-goal game there in the turning one. So I think it'll be interesting to see which team you get. But like you said, hopefully that rest pays off. So any last thoughts there, Ray, before we let you go?
Of course I'm happy as a Jets fan. I'm also, if I was in Edmonton, I'd be so optimistic right now with Ken Holland and his $20 million under the cap that he's going in with. Like, this is eerily similar to where Yzerman was later on in his run, with Holland being able to build a team around him. You know, it didn't happen right away for Yzerman. He was in the league a long time. So if I was an Oilers fan, you know, as an Oilers fan, you know, I'm sorry we had to sweep you straight out of the playoffs, but the optimism in Edmonton must be there, hopefully, after y'all get over this sweep that the Winnipeg Jets provided for y'all.
There you go. All right. Well, we wish you all the best.
There's lots to take away from it. Hopefully, we get to hear from you more as the playoffs progress.
That's right. That's what I was going to say. So we want to wish you well. You'll know after Monday night who you're facing next. I'm sure that you know, either way, it'll be another exciting series, because if it's Toronto, you know, you've got the full barrage of all of their firepower. But if it's Montreal, you got to fend off Carey Price, who's looking like he's back in form too. So either way, it's going to be an exciting series, and hopefully the rest has done dividends for that Jets team that I know came into the playoffs a little dinged up, but got out of there quick enough to get to the medics table, and they've all iced up and ready to go for another one. I'm sure they're actually probably wishing that, you know, they could be playing right now, but I'm sure that they'll get the jitters out and the rust off soon. And the other question is whether or not we'll start to see fans. I don't think we will in Manitoba, because you guys are having a hard time. But if you play in Montreal, there's fans in the building, and that could be a different home ice advantage. Either way, thank you, Ray. We appreciate it as always. Congratulations, as well deserved. And we hope that we'll talk to you very soon after you win another round and get to represent Canada. That's the goal.
I'm hoping that too. Hey, let's represent Western Canada first, and let's see what we can do.
There you go. Thank you, Ray.
All right, boys. Thank you. This has been a pleasure.
Are you feeling hungry? Busy Bee Vegan is a plant-based meal prep service offering pre-made, delicious, and healthy plant-based meals to the Greater Toronto Area. Whether you're curious about plant-based vegan eating, looking to improve your overall health and wellness, or simply too busy to cook, Busy Bee is for you. Their plans are focused on eating clean without sacrificing taste and contributing to a healthy planet. They have made it super simple. Choose and order your meals from the multiple plans they offer, and they will deliver your meals in environmentally friendly, compostable containers right to your door. You can find them on Instagram at Busy Bee Vegan Meals or on Facebook at Busy Bee Vegan. Go check out a small local business in Toronto and save the hassle of COVID grocery shopping and cooking. Let the Busy Bees feed you buzz-worthy meals. Okay, topic 2. I know we've all been dreading it. It is the end of another Oilers season. I hate to say this, but I was right. As we acknowledged in our playoff preview show, I was correct in one of my bold predictions from the beginning of the year when I said Thatcher Demko would be the definitive number 1 goaltender for the Canucks. And unfortunately, as much as it pains me to admit I was right when I suggested that Braydon was going to jinx the Oilers, he said they would win the Stanley Cup. What happened, Braydon? Where's the parade?
I have a lot to say. Whether or not I was the reason it jinxed was left to I can't be held responsible for this.
Oh, no, it is completely your fault, 100%. Jordan and I are both agreement on that.
All right, I take full responsibility then, you both of you. Let it be known, put it on the record. I take full responsibility for the Oilers being swept in 4 games. The just absolutely horrendous flashback to the Ducks taking on a comeback win as the Jets did over the. I take full responsibility for my part.
Everyone brought that up, and then it was like I had completely pushed it out of my brain. I just had such murky memories. Now maybe it was because I had drank a lot during that series, but I just had such a hard time remembering that event, which it is sort of solace. That's like, as much as this might hurt in the moment, it's like, I know that I will have completely wiped it from my memory very soon, and maybe it'll be gone. Let's just do this sort of structurally to help us move through this. Let's talk first really quickly, as we already did with Ray, just about the series. So, obviously the Oilers came up against a really hot goaltender. Connor Hellebuck played like the Vezina Trophy winner that he is. And they were able to roll almost 4 lines against the Oilers, all with high levels of both defensive success, really shutting down any offensive opportunities and especially sort of odd man opportunities. That's what the Oilers really thrived on during the year. They shut all that down for most of the series. Few obvious periods in Game 3 being the exception. But they also were able to score from a few different places when, the chips were down. This is 3 overtime games. The series was a lot closer than it felt, right, Elliott?
So yeah, absolutely. I know you guys have probably gotten into this quite a bit, but yeah, I mean, you it's 4 1-goal games. When you take out the empty netters in Game 1, 3 of those went to overtime. But at the end of the day, look, they lost. They lost 4 games. Doesn't really matter how. A first-round exit was not what we expected. And I think, my take on this year, as we look at it holistically, is sort of comparing reality to expectations. And so my take is this. I think the Oilers overperformed compared to expectations in the regular season. I think that was great. But that also led to some much higher expectations heading into the playoffs. And I think as much as they exceeded expectations in the playoffs or in the regular season, they failed to meet expectations in the playoffs. And that's the summation of the season for me. I think that a lot of good things happened this year. I think the way in which particularly Game 3 went has really soured a lot of, I think, what should be really positive reflection on a year that was really good. We watched the Edmonton Oilers win games throughout the season in a multitude of different ways. They were just as successful at winning 2-1 as they were 6-5. You saw amazing growth from some of their younger players like Puliarvi, Darnell Nurse took a major step this year. Obviously, Connor McDavid's remarkable season cannot go unmentioned, and all well backstopped by a 39-year-old wonder in Mike Smith, who really energized the team and gave it energy and gave it a leadership that I think has been lacking in Edmonton throughout the year. And I think to lay all of our feelings or at the feet of the 4-game sweep to Winnipeg would be juvenile and not thorough enough. And not to suggest that either of you are doing that, but I do get the sense that we're spending the playoffs are causing a little bit of more tumult than is really there should be, given what I think was all in all a good season. That being said, I would have liked to have seen at least 7 games in the first round if they were going to get kicked out. And I think a reasonable expectation was a round 2 exit for this team, and they didn't get there. So that's my summation. Obviously, I've had some time to think about it.
The season means nothing. Yes, there's a lot to take away from it, but what are we cheering for if not for wins in the playoffs and a Stanley Cup? And so, yes, I take full responsibility for my part in jinxing the Oilers this year, but you can rest assured that I will be making a very similar prediction next year, because those are the expectations I have as a fan. Now, they're lofty. But yeah, no, I mean, I'm proud of the steps that the team made in terms of some of those players taking the next step in their game. I want to see it succeed in the playoffs. That's my expectation. And so I guess it's harder for me to let go of the playoffs that were, because of what they were able to accomplish in the season. I want to be able to see it carried over. That's the frustrating part for me.
I think, as we said with Ray, a big part of this is also the recognition that, as hard as it is to stomach in the moment, every one of these steps is necessary for any team that's found, serious success. There's always been a few, usually shortly before they find the success, there's some struggles. And in that struggle, the team is able to develop the necessary calluses to survive a series like that. Winnipeg has been through a couple really hard playoff series in the last few years that have prepared them for what they just faced, which was to know that they were coming into a series where all expectations were they were the underdog. They didn't look like the underdog. They came in 100% confident in what they brought. And that's experience, right? We all joke about experience all the time. I got really frustrated at the beginning of the playoffs when the freaking TSN and Sportsnet kept saying the Oilers only had one Stanley Cup winner. We had two. Archibald won a Stanley Cup with Pittsburgh Penguins. Chiasson won one with Washington in back-to-back years. It matters that you have experience. Those are really important lessons. Losing game 3, I think, will be a really important thing for those core guys. They will know that and remember that. Not only the next time they play Winnipeg, but the next time they have a lead in a playoff series game that they need to close out. That's an important place to have been there. And guess what? It won't be the last time that they have a situation like that. It's going to happen. This is how this works. But I think Elliott's right. I think too that, you have to take the whole season, as short as it really was in some ways, in its totality. It was a great year for the Oilers. Yes, did they overperform? Yeah, maybe they performed exactly where they were supposed to be. That's hard to say, right? Make it 82 games and we find out if it's a different team. But I will say I never felt confident going into any one of those playoff games the way I did, I don't know, in 2016 or 17, whatever it was, in a different way, because I don't know what this team is. I couldn't figure it out. I know we didn't have depth. I was impressed with some of the depth guys. Jujar played well, I thought. Devin Shore actually played really well. And some guys that didn't necessarily have great seasons. Those guys, they played well. So that shows you that the playoffs are a different thing and sometimes things happen. We're going to save our what is to come conversation for a little bit down the road because we'll have some time to do that. But just in closing with this topic, what would be your final takeaways there, Elliott?
Well, I just need to say I need to make an amendment to amendment. It turned out Tanti Pulling was right. The Edmonton Oilers did do nothing at the deadline because Dmitry Kulikov in game 4, where everything's on the line, didn't even play. And I will stand by the fact that the Edmonton Oilers did nothing at this trade deadline, just as I said they would back in that episode. And I need that on the record.
Let's dig in on one more thing real quick. I know we're over time, but here's a thought, just because that's part of it. We did see some interesting coaching decisions about personnel. We saw, obviously, Russell came in the last game, and he actually played really well. I thought he was a really important piece of that overtime. But let's just talk about that. We've had 3 overtime games in a row, different strategies sort of imposed in each one. To be fair, the first 2 were both goals scored off of lost faceoffs in the defensive zone, something we did talk about at the trade deadline as being a weakness for the Oilers. They didn't go out and get Glendening. They didn't go out and make that center position better. They just sort of hoped that the guys they had would somehow improve their percentage, and they just didn't. But coaching-wise, I mean, why are you not calling – here's what I would say. Why are you not calling a timeout after the 3rd goal in Game 3? Why is there no timeout called? The reason Tippett gives in the post game is, well, we were a minute away from a TV timeout. Yep, they scored in that minute. Now you're tied. So that's for me a coaching missed opportunity to actually have some control of something. Just calm your guys down and say, what the fuck, guys? Let's just play defense like we have all year long. The Oilers were the second best team in the entire league when it came to games they were leading going into the 3rd period. That is not how they played the rest of the year. And then the other one is in Game 4 when you have your triple overtime. I understand that he benched the Ethan Bear, Slater Cuckoo defensive pair after giving up the tying goal. I understood that for the first overtime going with just the 4 guys, but I'm sorry, at some point you got to start to roll your lines. At some point you got to put everybody out there in a game that's going that long and just see who wants to be the hero. You got to have all 6. Again, I said this earlier, Darnell Nurse playing as much as he did in Game 4 is incredible. It's amazing, especially now you know that he was doing this all while knowing that his wife, or his partner, his fiance, was in labor. So all of that going on in the background, Darnell Nurse puts in a career high game minutes played, unbelievable, second only all time to Seth Jones, who did one last year. But why was it necessary? You had 2 extra bodies there, and then you put them out there for the penalty kill in the 3rd overtime. Yeah, you get the penalty kill, but it's those guys going off the ice that causes the odd man ruch.
Well, it's not. Yeah,
coaching for me has some question marks. There were a lot
of different bounces that went
I'm ranting
the other way.
I mean, I think the coaching conversation is an interesting one. I think Tipp has been an excellent regular season coach, as we knew he was. And imagine that. The Oilers overperformed in the regular season. Tippett has not had the same kind of success as a coach in the playoffs. And this is now 2 series where he has been the second best of 2 coaches in a series. And really small, minute decisions. I mean, this is a tough year to be coaching. You got a taxi squad. You're trying to keep people fresh. The Edmonton Oilers, I never ever got the sense had like a solidified 4 lines going into the playoffs like they did in previous years. He was never really, we haven't really been able to get that mix right, whether it's Draisaitl, Nugent, and Yamamoto, or McDavid and Draisaitl should be playing together. I mean, the other thing, but I would say, and this goes back to the conversation around why I was right that the Oilers didn't do anything at the deadline. There wasn't much to be done at the deadline. The Oilers carried the lineup that they had at the beginning of the year, and there's still some clear gaps in it. And the playoffs are emblematic of if the players are going to show your weakness. And where was the weakness? 3rd and 4th line depth scoring, so and a solidified depth on D. And that's what was exposed in the playoffs. The Jets were able, their coach recognized that, and they produced a game that capitalized on one of their few strengths, that and goaltending. And that was the difference in the series. It's hard to lay that at the feet of Tippett. Next year is a different animal. They got $25 million or whatever in cap space. For the first time since he's been here, Holland can really, really, really do what he wants with this lineup in some meaningful ways. And there's some difficult questions around that too. But, again, they didn't do anything at the deadline. Other teams did. And that's the difference. Desharnais, 2017, you want to talk about faceoffs? Desharnais, not only does he improve Edmonton Oilers faceoffs, he wins a game for the Oilers in round 1 in overtime. We needed a Desharnais goal in one of these 3 overtimes. We didn't get it. Well, when you don't do anything at the deadline, that's what happens.
All right. Well, we are way over time, and as I said, we will get to the what happens next conversation. It will be a fun one. We'll leave it there.
Hopefully,
for now.
they re-sign Kulikov.
That's topic 2.
Spring in full bloom, it's gardening season. For 18 years, Zocalo has been providing Edmonton with plants, gifts, and flowers. This local flower boutique is located right in the heart of Edmonton's Little Italy. With a wide array of flowers, plants, and gift options, they provide delivery and curbside pickup. Check out Zocalo online at zocalo.ca or call them at 780-428-0754.
Okay, topic 3 this week. Well, there's sort of a couple parts to this, but let's start it off this way. After the Oilers were eliminated, obviously emotions are high in the playoffs, but unfortunately for some supposed Edmonton fans, some people took to social media, and Ethan Bear was the victim of some racist comments online on his social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, just horrible things said to Ethan Bear. Obviously this behavior is completely disgusting and despicable. But unfortunately, more and more common. We're seeing a lot of athletes being subjected to all kinds of things online. And it's interesting because obviously we talked several times already on this show just about how we're in sort of this period of time where people seem to be trying in many ways to bring to light, conversations about racism, conversations about systemic racism, conversations about bullying and all of these things. And yet it seems like it's more prevalent than it's ever been. Ethan Bear, obviously a member of the Ochapawis First Nations, Cree. He had the wonderful opportunity. I don't know if it was it this year or last season during the preseason, the Oilers invited him to wear his name in Cree on his jersey, which was an awesome opportunity for him to share his culture. But it's also, again, just one tiny step forward, and we constantly find like we're taking multiple steps backwards. So I don't know where to really begin with this, but it feels like this is just a conversation about why does this seem like it just keeps happening here, and what are the steps that need to happen moving forward with it, I guess. Braydon, what were your thoughts on this when you heard about this behavior?
It's disgusting. It's disgusting, and it's cowardice. I think the fact that that these players, it's like, had they won that game, would they be subject to something that disgraceful? And just the fact that it's happening regardless, it's important that the people that did stand up against it on that platform did, and we saw statements from the organization, the league, and the Ethan Bear himself saying that denouncing this behavior and making another stand. I don't want to keep seeing people having to make a stand against this. I want to be able to see that this league, the society, the people, in these interactions, just that it doesn't, that these people aren't subject to that kind of hatred, that kind of, it's just repulsive. It's absolutely repulsive. It makes me really sad. You said it was online that this happened, and now we're starting to see it in other crowds are starting to come back to games. We're starting to see it in the NBA here with, Russell Westbrook had popcorn thrown at him. Trae Young was spat on in a global pandemic. Kyrie Irving got a water bottle thrown at him tonight. Like, it's getting really out of control, really out of hand here, with that kind of just awful behavior. It's absolutely uncalled for.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. There is some connection there with how the fan behavior seems to be part of it. Elliott?
Well, yeah, let's put this in perspective here. In the same episode that we opened up with Jordan acknowledging, proof of the cultural genocide that exists in this company, we have an Indigenous hockey player, of which there are far too few given this country's history and its prevalence for hockey, being subjected to, racial slurs because of a poor clearing attempt in a hockey game. So let's just start there in terms of calling a spade a spade. It's unacceptable in relation to Ethan Bear, and I was very proud of the NHL's response. I was proud of the Oilers' response. Obviously, it's very brave of Ethan Bear to address it directly, and I thought that was important. And the subsequent rally in Edmonton, you have to acknowledge those people that came out and said, like, we don't stand for this, and this is unacceptable. Let's acknowledge the good in this too. But the problem with this, I find, is too often in hockey, and I think it's probably in all sports, but I pay attention to hockey, is that it ultimately, criticism of players, people, behaviors gets whittled down to this, like, the lowest common denominator thing. And so Ethan Bear is Indigenous. We're going to say something about his Indigenous heritage in response to that play. You can only imagine what countless things Darnell Nurse has experienced in his life, being a man of color in this country. And in addition, like in the realm of social media, Taylor Hall and attitude. It always seems to come down to just like the worst behavior, and that's somehow acceptable. But let me be clear here. My position is that the NHL media types have allowed for this behavior to exist for a long time. What happens at the end of every game? There's two congruent talk shows that exist at the same time in Edmonton after every Oilers game, in which fans can just basically call in and bitch and say rant and say awful things. And the prevalence of social media and the proclivity of social media now has just allowed people to take that to a degree further, and to tag the player that they're talking about in it so that the player potentially could see it. It's unacceptable. We need to be calling it out. The leagues need to be taking a more of a stand against it in terms of behavior. I think these social media platforms need to be having a good hard think about what's acceptable behavior and conversations online. And I think, folks like us need to be really cautious about what we say and how we talk. And I think we do a good job, but there's lots of podcasts like this that do not. And I think that, that breeds a culture of real negativity and awfulness that's just unacceptable. And it's buffoonery. It's always the lowest common denominator with these things. And it's not criticism. And most people that talk about sports don't know enough to talk about it anyway. I just find it's appalling, and more needs to be done.
Yeah, I think obviously Braydon brings up every one of those instances Braydon brings up is an act of violence. I mean, those players were assaulted by a person in the stands throwing something at them. Whether I think it was Russell Westbrook who said, would you throw a bucket of popcorn at me on the street? Because the truth is that people wouldn't be doing that kind of behavior. But you're right. There's sort of this, I'm not going to say it's this simple, but it's sort of this weird thing. It feels like there's this weird thing where it's almost like we've lived this past year somewhat isolated from other people in certain situations, and certainly away from large crowds. And many people have taken that time, and their only real interaction with other fans or with their sports is online. And it's like we've completely forgotten how to behave in public situations. These fans who might hurl insults or complaints or rants or whatever you say, from a message board, all of a sudden are back in a stadium and they think that this behavior is okay, and it's completely inappropriate. Obviously with the Ethan Bear one, I mean, last year when the bubble began, I don't know if you guys remember this, there was a, pre-bubble press conference. All the players had different opportunities to speak to the media over Zoom or whatever. And it was sort of following, the weeks of protest about George Floyd's murder and the beginning of that whole summer of activism. And, the Oilers players were asked about it because they knew that there was going to be potentially players kneeling, and we saw Matt Dumba do that, and different protests from different sports leagues, obviously led by the NBA originally. But the players were asked, and obviously, as the media will do, the questions were asked to the members of the Oilers of color, whether it's Jujar and Darnell Nurse, and in this case, Ethan Bear was asked. And it was an interesting response by Ethan Bear. And I actually went back. I wanted to go see if I could find the clip on YouTube, and I did. You can go back and watch it there. But he was asked twice in the press conference about experiences of racism growing up. And he admitted that, yeah, there's always been some guys who, they might say something, but usually if they were players, you could call them out for it and they would be willing to sort of, apologize. That he never felt like he'd experienced anything on the ice or anything that was, really heinous. But he also acknowledged that he didn't really feel like it was really his place to say anything about racism, or if he wasn't really comfortable standing up for, a social issue, because he was a really young player and his job should be focusing on, making the team and all of that. And I listened to that. Even then I listened to it and I thought to myself, this feels wrong, that a player, even at that stage in his career, should even for a moment be afraid to speak his mind, because he's been put in a situation where there is such a systemic hierarchy to the organization that his voice is not, he doesn't feel empowered enough to have a voice in that space, even though he is by his very existence entitled to that opinion and that space to express himself. And I felt really disappointed in that. And I remember having conversations with people about it and sort of saying, like, I wish he knew that as a fan of that team, I want him to have that platform. I would want to support him in having that platform. And I hope that, he feels that now. I would also say, just Elliott mentioned, there are some silver linings to it, I suppose. You did see a big rally in Edmonton about following it, but there also has been apparently the largest uptick in donations and fundraising for two of Canada's largest Indigenous sports organizations. The one run by Becky Scott with the Canadian Olympic Committee has found they've had a huge swell in fundraising, and many of the people donating have said that it was because of this story that they felt like they wanted to support Indigenous youth in sport, which is amazing. And I hope that that's the kind of response people have. Obviously, the social media part, we saw all the players come to his defense and many people with the hashtag I stand with Ethan Bear. But it's unfortunate that it takes these kind of events for that to happen. And I would hope that we all can continue to try to encourage the people around us who are not as engaged in these topics to have those conversations. There's a great line, and I actually can't tell you who it's from, but there's a great line I like to remind myself of, which is that the woke need to remember to leave space for those still waking. And that's the truth. We can't stop the conversation because, as Braydon said, I'm just tired of having to deal with this. That's the truth. We should be tired of this. The truth is, though, for many of us, it's a new thing that we're just a part of now, and we're becoming more and more aware of. But we can't stop until we don't see these problems anymore. And obviously, they're very different. The ones people throwing bottles and things is a different situation than racism. Let's not conflate those two together. But
yeah, but
still
at the
behavior.
same time, something Kyrie did mention in that interview after was that there is an underlying racism in some of these actions that are taking place, and there is zero room for it. And even the fact that like you said with Ethan Bear, that he didn't feel like he was able to stand into his voice at a young age. I mean, the sad fact that he even has to at that age
that's true
is just awful. It's awful, and it needs to change, and hopefully this conversation continue to
I will say too, we should just
that.
tag there the gentleman who threw the bottle at Kyrie was arrested tonight in Boston, so there is at least some positivity moving from one night to the other, because obviously the guy with the popcorn a couple nights ago, we don't know whether he was even kicked out of the building, but at least the NBA as an organization has made it very clear that any player who is assaulted by any of these fans has the opportunity to press charges, and they have. So that's good news.
Well, imagine that it was in Boston. The last thing I'd say on that is, like, for me, I feel like, Ethan Bear's a role model to lots of Indigenous kids, lots of Indigenous people out there. I work in an organization that walks alongside lots of Indigenous folks. Ethan Bear is a known name, known commodity, and means a lot to people. And I think this symbolism that someone of this power, of this wealth, in this position, like Ethan Bear, can still experience racism, only provides almost an underlying understanding that it's okay for them to experience racism too, that our society just accepts it. And the same goes for, the conversations in the NBA. And so, like, if we're not stopping it at this level, then what the hell are we doing? We're not doing enough. And I think that these are role models for these folks and need to be supported as such.
All right. Well, I guess the conversation continues. That's what's really important about it. Thanks both for another great show. We won't take another week off until the next long weekend, Braydon. Don't worry.
Until the next Oilers loss.
It could be just as long. But after all of that, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Elliott. Thank you, Braydon. That was Hat-Trick. Hat-Trick is a member of the Ordinary Podcasting Network. It's produced every week by Jordan Dowler-Coltman and Braydon Dowler-Coltman. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thanks for listening.